Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Today, we have a very special guest, an author of a book called Unbroken. She works as a psychotherapist and is an inspirational speaker. Madeleine Black, pleased to have you on the show.
Thanks, Jim. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what caught my eyes is your story, Madeleine. I read a lot of books. It's no secret. I read lots of books. I've probably read over 1,000 books, if not even more. And the books that I like to read, or what catches my attention, are the ones about people who overcome adversity. I've read some really powerful books. One of the most powerful books I've read was a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and it's about Dr. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist. And he talks about his, cutting a long story short, he talks about his chronicles in Auschwitz, and so it's a lot about how meaning is really important in adversity. It talks a lot about attitude, and for me, it was a really powerful story because he sort of draws attention to some of the stuff that they went through, and obviously he was creating logotherapy prior to going into camp, but he afterwards developed it further and got it out there, which is a very powerful existential type of therapy. But one of the things that sort of sticks to mind to me is that he talks about the meaning and how the people who survived, in his detail, he said, had the strongest meaning. And what catches my eye is that there's a lot of authors out there, best-selling authors, and they talk about how you can transform your life, how you can do this and that. And I take value in that. I do respect them. I don't sort of take as much out of those books as I take out of people who've had these real life stories. And obviously one can only not even imagine what it was like for Dr. Viktor Frankl. But what I would say is that, that's someone who has really experienced the tough end of life. And when people like that write, I listen and read, because I think that any sort of wisdom they can share, there's a lot to take out of that. And I took a lot out of that, and I took a lot of books I've read. Your story is a powerful story. I'll let you share your story yourself and how it unraveled to take you where, or certainly maybe correlate to where you are today. But tell us a bit about what you do, please, Madeleine, if you don't mind.
Sure. I work mainly as a psychotherapist, and I call myself an accidental speaker or an accidental activist because after sharing my story publicly for the first time online in 2014, I was just invited to share my story at events, at schools and conferences. And every time I speak, someone will then ask me to share my story somewhere else. So I call myself an accidental speaker. I never really intended to speak, but this seems to be the path that I'm on right now.
Mm-hmm. And so, if you could sort of briefly share what you went through, and for the audience who may not have read your book Unbroken, or may not be familiar with your work, but just sort of give us a brief insight into what had happened to you and how that sort of impacted your life.
Yeah, my memoir, Unbroken, is my story of being gang raped when I was 13 by two American teenagers who weren't much older than me. They were maybe 17 or 18. And my journey is really about surviving, healing, forgiveness, transformation, and hope.
Wow, that's been really, really powerful stuff. And, you mentioned there forgiveness, and it's a tough, forgiveness is one of those words I think that sort of a lot of people say these days, and in those circumstances you can fully appreciate, at least I can appreciate, someone who doesn't share forgiveness with people who've done stuff like that, horrendous. But how did you sort of get to the point where you could forgive?
Well, again, I'd say I was an accidental forgiver. There's no way, if you told me years ago, I would forgive them, because I was so full of hate and bitterness and revenge. And, I used to fantasize about somebody kidnapping the two of them, beating them up, tying them up, taking them to an empty flat and raping and torturing them for hours on end, just like they had done to me. And I really thought I was in a good place. I made a decision years ago I would never have children, but then I decided if I didn't have children, then they would have won. So I came up with a plan that I call my best revenge, and I now have 3 gorgeous girls. So obviously I got past that. But I was determined to just live my life as well as I could, and I refused to be identified by what had happened to me. But my eldest daughter, Anna, turned 13, and all of a sudden I had nightmares and flashbacks and memories just flooding in. So I was a really bad client. I went to a therapist and said, I want you to take all these memories away. I don't want to see them anymore. It was like a porn film running around my head, and I was the star of the show. But I soon realized that, you know, my way in was going to be my way out, that I couldn't block the memories out anymore. I think our mind shuts off our trauma until we're ready to face it, and it was my time to face it. And I thought, you know, after all, they haven't killed me. I am still alive. So once I really learned to accept the images, the pictures that I saw, life was much better. But towards the end of my therapy, my therapist said to me, you know, maybe these two young men weren't born rapists. And I was so angry to start with. I couldn't believe what he was saying to me. You know, how dare he suggest such a thing? But, you know, he planted a seed in my head, and that seed, it started to grow. And I really wanted to understand, how could two young men, not much older than me, behave so violently towards another human being? You know, what had they seen? What had they heard or experienced to make them behave that way? How had life conditioned them? And I realized that in their dehumanizing of me, they're really just dehumanizing themselves, that they weren't connected to their source, their goodness, their light, whatever you want to call it. And somehow, in my heart, I started to feel compassion towards them. I have a really good friend who used to be a midwife, and she once said something to me which has stayed with me forever. And she told me that she has brought thousands of babies into this world, but she has never once met an evil baby. And that really stayed with me. You know, I think we all come into the world a blank sheet, and we do get conditioned by life. And somehow, when I started to feel compassion towards these two young men, I started to forgive them for what they, not for what they did to me, but for their human frailty. And to me, forgiveness is about understanding. It's not saying that everybody has to forgive in order to heal. This is the way that I chose to do it, but it allowed me to let go of all that anger and bitterness and hate. And it's so much more peaceful this way. It's much easier to live my life like this.
No, it's you know, really, really powerful stuff. Really, really powerful stuff. And, you know, it makes sense, and, you know, to move forward and to have forgiveness, you know, from a logical point of view. I do agree that, well, to a point, I think that people are born in this world with good. I think that's a combination of biological, psychological, sociological factors that determine who one is. And I think that throughout one's course in life, the environment does shape their reality. I speak my truth, Madeleine. Some people don't like what I say, some people do. I don't think I've got to that point where you only know, I suppose, if you've been in a situation directly, and I haven't been. But going off what you're saying and similar stories I've heard, I don't know if I could.
Well, you know, when I was full of anger and hate and revenge, they had no idea that I was harboring all this towards them. And the only person it was hurting was me, my kids, my husband, my friends. And it was really unhealthy for me, you know, for my living. And it is much easier this way. And it's, you know, I don't need them to be remorseful to forgive them. It was a decision that I made from my heart. I can choose to let go and just live my life as best as I could, or I could have held on to all that hurt and disappointment in the meantime, creating loads of mental anguish and loads of, you know, unhealthiness as well.
Yeah, no, that's, you know, really, really powerful stuff. And I think that, you know, people who have been through certain situations like you've been through, who share the experience, for people who are going through certain things, can help them a lot. I really do believe that people have been through certain situations and got through it as much as one can get through, and have an adaptive life, so to speak. It's really, really powerful stuff. And you mentioned in 2014 you sort of spoke openly. I you know, grew up with my own challenges like most people do, and for many years I sort of kept it to one side as well, until someone suggested that I should speak and tell people what life was like for me, because everyone had this impression that it was like a Pollyanna type thing. And when I first spoke, it was tough. I felt, like I had nothing on, really. It was really, really tough, but then I felt a sense of liberation. And I don't know if you sort of experienced the same thing when you sort of spoke about your what you went through. How did it feel to speak?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the first time it was shared was the 22nd of September 2014. I will always remember that date. And it was shared with an organisation called the Forgiveness Project. So they share stories of forgiveness from both victims and perpetrators that have kind of changed their life around. And I have to admit, pressing that send button, sharing it on Facebook, I did feel anxious because a lot of people didn't know my story, friends and family, or a lot of them didn't know it was near fatal. They didn't know the level of violence I'd had experienced. And I realised, I guess there was still some shame. What will people think? Will they judge me? And Marina, who is the founder of our organisation, she calls us story healers rather than storytellers, which I always love. And she said, you don't need to put your picture, you don't need to put your name, you can be anonymous. But somebody I know just prior to that was going to prison to meet the serial rapist who had broken into her home and raped her. And I just thought, if she can do that, then I can share my name and my face. I don't have anything to be ashamed about anymore. It was something that was done to me. I never invited it in. I shouldn't be ashamed. But it has really helped me to just crack any shame that was left. And the more I speak, actually, as you say, the more liberating my words are. It really has freed me. And I know now it was the courage of somebody else that helped me find my voice. And I'm helping other people to find their voice as well.
No, definitely. I can imagine. And it was really, really powerful stuff. Definitely really, really powerful stuff. And what sort of reactions do you get when you sort of speak to people and you do your speaking? And what sort of reaction do you generally get from people when you do that? Are they...
Well, often they are stunned into silence because I don't hold back. I just think there's no point making people feel comfortable. We have to feel uncomfortable. It is horrible that this still takes place, in this century. Every day, somewhere on this planet, a man, woman, or child will be raped or abused in some way. So I do tell them the details to a certain extent. I'm not there to make it easy for them. But people, every time I speak, I will have somebody share their story with me, either their own personal experience or their wife or their husband or their friend or their aunt, and they'll tell me they're too ashamed to speak. They're too full of guilt. They think it was their fault. And that's why I speak, to try to end the stigma and the silence and the shame that surrounds sexual violence.
Definitely. And when you say the shame, that's when you sort of mention the shame, in what way is there shame around the time?
For me, I think it's because such an intimate crime and the way that we process the trauma. For years, I just felt contaminated. I felt dirty. I felt worthless. I tried to kill myself. I ended up in a psychiatric ward for about 8 weeks when I was a teenager. I just thought if anybody found out what had happened to me, that they would think the same, like I thought about myself, my altered image of myself. And I think a lot of people really believe that about themselves as well, that because of the messages our rape culture society gives out, what were you drinking? What were you wearing? How late was it? Why did you go up to this hotel room? We're made to feel guilty anyway. And on top of that, we feel our own guilt. So it's just magnified by ourselves and by society. So I wore shame for years. It was like a cloak that I put on every day. And now I don't care, who knows? So writing it and speaking about it has just ended all of the shame. But I see is where most people get caught. They lock themselves into a prison of silence for years.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. And I think for me, it's like a bottle of fizzy pop where you shake it, and if you don't, once you sort of shake it for so long and open it, it explodes. And I really do believe that anyone who's going through any trauma, get help as early as you can. Because,
absolutely, it's never too late to find your voice, and giving it oxygen is kind of what I call it. Has been the biggest thing, because when we keep it inside, it just festers and it poisons us on the inside, and it has to leak out in some way. And for me, it leaked out in so many ways. I can look back now and see I was just trying to numb out and forget, but I used drugs, alcohol, I became anorexic, I was suicidal, I was promiscuous, I had phobias, fears, depression, and all because I couldn't find my voice and say what had happened.
No, definitely, and certainly in Gestalt, for example, there's a notion of dissociating or separating, or even in hypnosis, where we can separate ourselves from what's happened by writing, by facing out terror, by speaking out truth, whatever.
Absolutely.
It can help us in our own way. Obviously, different things help different people.
Yeah, I've used hypnosis in the past as well.
Yeah, no, and hypnosis is quite. I mean, it's a modality I use as well as many other modalities, and I think that it's effective in certain situations. Although, like all modalities, I think each case is independent to its own. There's no one size fits all, and certainly in trauma, for me. We could sort of go into the intricacies of how it affects the brain and impacts parts of the brain and how they work. But sort of cutting a long story short and not getting too technical, people sometimes, Madeleine, say, and I used to work with young people in care homes, for example, in education, and I was one of the, when I went into work and do education with young people in care homes, I had an extensive background studying many modalities for many, many years. But I went there to do education. So I decided, my infinite wisdom, to bring in mindfulness for some of them who had suffered abandonment, who suffered not as a treatment protocol, just to help them to engage in education, to feel more. But I had a moment of introspection one time, and there was a young girl, about 17 years of age. She was very violent, very aggressive, and she'd, assault many people throughout the day. And I would do relaxation with her. And mindfulness with her, and she responded and said it was really useful for her to cut down escalations. But then I thought to myself, it sort of became the buzzword, mindfulness. It was everywhere, and I thought, well, for me, doing experiential work before you get there might be a better idea for some people, because under trauma, certain parts of the brain aren't working very well. That's scientifically proven. And to ask someone to sit down and be mindful when they suffer this horrendous trauma, there's no way to run, fight, flight, or freeze. And for me, it's about incorporating different things for different people to achieve different outcomes. And that's the big thing. And sometimes it concerns me when people make these ridiculous claims saying they can do this, that, and the other. And they may mean well, whatever, really. But the reality is that, in certain circumstances, it is natural and normal to go through maybe not the same things you went through chronologically, but certainly to have those feelings. And, and I think for me, I encourage people to seek proper professional guidance and do what you did to talk about it, because in the end, really, there's a lot of conflicting ideas out there, and I think, there's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely, yeah. And I always say that my book is not a self-help guide. It's not a step-by-step plan. This is how I did it, and some of the therapies I did may be too alternative for some people, and I don't think it was one particular therapy that was the one that healed me. I think it was all of them. They all helped together collectively to help me. I mean, even windsurfing, I've tried ayahuasca, I've been to sweat lodges, I've just done so many things. It was actually one of the things that really helped me was body work. I was having therapy and I couldn't trust my memories when they all came back, and I actually really thought I was mad. I used to say to my therapist, well, if it was so bad, surely I would remember it. Now I understand it's because it was so bad I couldn't remember it. And he told me, he recommended going for therapeutic massage. And the very first time I went, I could hear this person screaming and crying and kicking and fighting. And then I realized it was me. All these emotions that get stored in our cells and our muscles. And the therapist was just qualified enough, amazing, intuitive, to help me release what was in my body. So my journey has always been about getting back into my body and remembering all the memories, because on the night it happened, I'm very aware of floating out of my body, and I was watching the scene from down below. I was sitting on top of a wardrobe because it was too much for my body. You have to get out of the way when there's trauma. It was like a near-death experience as well. So I just got out of the way, and I never felt back in. So everything I do has been to ground me. And when you talk about mindfulness, I just think we all need to be grounded. We all need to be connected in with both feet on this planet, however you find your way to do it. But if you're connected in and grounded, you can stay steady and, you know, sail your ship in whatever seas you find.
No, that's really interesting stuff, and I think certainly from the point of view, your writings and the book, as much as anything else, people sometimes go through certain days where, and I'm not sort of comparing people's problems or lists, but we all go through our stuff, and whatever's pressing for us is pressing for us. But I think sometimes, we can go through one of those days where a few things go wrong, so to speak, and we make more of it, and I think sometimes when and certainly in my experience, I can't speak for other people, certainly when I read stories like yourself, I think, you know what, the human spirit is really strong. There are people out there that have gone through things that, you just wouldn't believe. And, sometimes, I'm sure we've all been there, something happens, we don't get something, or something goes wrong, or, a flat tire or whatever really type thing. And I'm not undermining that, obviously, but there's certain things, I think perspective is a big thing for me. And I think that, certainly people who read the book and listen to your story can galvanize themselves. Okay, 13-year-old girl, can get through and keep going, and it certainly encourages hope.
Yeah, I have to say, I didn't get here overnight. It has been a process.
No, for sure.
Next year will be 40 years ago that it happened to me. But once you work the trauma, however you find your way to work the trauma out your body, I saw that I had a choice. And I could choose to stay angry and hurt and disappointed, or I could choose to let it go. And then I saw really, it's not what happens to us that is important. It's what we do with it that really matters. And if we choose to, we can get past anything that happens to us in life.
Definitely, I think so too, and certainly in the sense that one of our freedoms is the choice to have our attitude that we have about certain events. We have a choice, and certain things can get taken away from us. That's life, and life isn't always fair. Life sometimes
it doesn't come with a guarantee.
Exactly. For many years I've tried to make sense of many things in terms of why certain things happen to certain people, and you can sort of wrap your head, and I've certainly done that, especially in my journey, through doing research, through studying, through working with people. And truth be told, there's certain times you'll sort of sit there and think this life just does not make damn sense sometimes. But that's why I think it's important to have some sort of level of existentialism where you make a meaning, and you're here, and whatever meaning you make, whatever purpose you've got that freedom to choose the attitude.
You started off by speaking about. Sorry, you started off by speaking about Viktor Frankl, and my father was a Holocaust survivor, and he very much had the same opinion as Viktor Frankl. And he said he could see in the camps the ones that were already dead. They were still alive, but they were already dead. And he knew that if he went a day without hope, he wouldn't have survived. He always knew he would get out of there, and he got out of there.
Yeah, and that's
and Viktor Frankl very much says the same. He always, has that hope as well, and that attitude that we bring to life.
No, definitely. What sort of amazes me about that story, how his family, I think it was his mum, his dad, his brother, if I remember the book, I've read it a couple of times correctly, all got killed in the camps. His wife as well had an unborn child who had been killed in the camps. And she was one of the motivations for him, you would say, to want to get out of there. When he found out she'd passed away, it was another blow. So, I mean, it's one of them, really. You kind of think the human will is strong, and like you say, certainly from reading that book and not similar books, but certain books that people have experienced tremendous suffering, there is that recurring theme, that meaning. And I know it's a deep question to ask, and for yourself, but your meaning, your drive, your purpose behind your writings, your speaking, and I think it's really inspirational stuff, and I'm sure people are going to take a lot away. Do you have a driving force that sort of propels you to sort of
You know what? There was something always internal that was driving me to clean up. And I call the trauma cleaning up the mess. And I don't know where it's come from. I think I've had great parents, or I know I've had really good parents. They've been my teachers. My mum had her neck broken in an operation and she was bedridden for a few years. And one day she was listening actually to a hypnotherapist on the radio and decided to go to see him. And she came home, sacked all the nurses and the housekeepers at night, and threw away all her pills and used self-hypnosis and recovered. My father, as I mentioned, was a Holocaust survivor, but if you met him, you'd never have known his mum, his dad, his brothers and sisters were all murdered in Auschwitz. The youngest one, Mordechai, was only 6. He loved life. He just used to muck about the whole time. And he, not by what he said, but how he lived his life, he showed me that we can really get past anything. And I just really go with the flow. You know, I never really intended to speak or write a book. All these things just kind of happen. So I'm in that phase where I just trust life, that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And I feel that if I can speak out about rape and sexual violence, then it's almost like a duty that because I can do it, then I should. And I know the impact of sharing it, what it does. You know, one of the most amazing things that's happened to me as I was asked to be interviewed by BBC Radio 4, and Sir Trevor McDonald was my interviewer, so obviously I couldn't say no. And it was amazing. But what took place afterwards was incredible. I was contacted by a friend who told me her mum had been listening. And her mum basically ended 64 years of silence. She went on to tell her that she had been raped as a 17-year-old and just never spoke about it, just got on with her life. And my friend thinks that if she hadn't told her, she would have taken it to the grave. And it was just because she heard me on the radio that she connected to a woman who felt understood exactly what she had been through. And she has made me think of all the other men and women out there that can't find their voice yet because of their shame and their guilt. And every time I speak, I just think of that one woman. She is my motivation. She is the reason that I speak out.
No, that's really interesting stuff, and it's, you know, it's important. I think that families is really important, and to have family as role models, have people around you, is crucial. In terms of the support you had outside the family, I don't sort of want to have a go at the system. A lot of hard-working people in the system, and they work hard, they work tirelessly, and obviously the resources aren't always easy. From the point of view, for you to access help, was it difficult to get help, to find someone to talk to? What was the protocol?
Well, one of the last things they said to me, as one of them held a knife against my throat, was if I speak about it, they will kill me. And they had already used this knife on me, so I believed them. So I couldn't speak about it for about 3 years. And when I did finally speak about it, I just wrote a note and left it on my bed and went to school that day. And when they called, there was another girl involved. And when they called her, she said it hadn't happened like I said it did. They were nice guys, they were sons of diplomats. And so I just felt not believed, and that was a really hard time in my life. So it's taken me a long time to get the help. When I was in hospital, I decided to get my notes as research for my book to see if they had any idea why I think I went from a normalish kind of just a regular 13 geeky shy child to one overnight who couldn't eat or sleep or function, and they had no idea. 8 weeks in hospital, they just treated me for anorexia and depression, no idea that I was traumatized. So hopefully the psychiatric system has changed. This was the late 1970s, but it really took for me to try different attempts and different people. And when I decided to become a mum, that's really when things changed. When I first met my husband, I was traveling in Israel for a year. I met a Glaswegian, and I always said to him, I'll be with you, but I'll never have kids. Somehow in my head, I thought that becoming a mum would just be too much like being raped, and I just couldn't bear it, the idea of it. I was just so afraid. And then we were away. We used to save all our annual leave and go somewhere interesting in the winter. We were traveling in Thailand for a month. And he asked me the question, and I was all ready to say no, but something came in, and I thought, if I never become a mum, then they'll have won. I don't want them to have power and control over my life anymore. And that's when I I came up with my plan. I called my best revenge to live my life as well as I could. And then I went to various different people to get help. But I had to go through a few for me to find one that really helped. And firstly, I went to, I thought, oh, actually, you're worse than me. I could see I couldn't connect, or they couldn't help, or that it was too big for them. You can look in someone's eyes and you can see if they can hold what you're going to say. And you just give them a tiny bit. And if your eyes don't miss it, your gut tells you it's going to be too much. They can't hear what I have to say. And then I couldn't even say all of it. It takes a really special person to hold all that stuff, because it isn't nice to hear. But actually, the first person that helped me was another hypnotherapist, and she helped me to a certain extent because she'd kind of hypnotherapy and psychotherapy together, and I really wanted to get to a place where I could give birth. And obviously, I succeeded. I have 3 children. But when I came back and the memories came back, I thought, well, how do I know that? I couldn't trust it. I had to then go through all the pictures again. I was worried that the hypnosis might have changed in some way. I know now it didn't, but that's where my mind was at the time, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. And I think that you're sharing your experience there is quite powerful. And I mean, this is my opinion, really. I think for me, based on what I understand, I listen to people and I do a lot of traveling, and in my experience, I think that more work needs to be done for the victim. I think that the perpetrator, these are my sentiments based on my experiences, get help. I think the victim, from the experiences that I've spoken to, don't get anywhere near as much help as they need. There's got to be more help for them. Not only do they experience the incident, what people fail to understand is after what's happened, there's a trail in people's lives, and it's like throwing a ripple in a pond. It doesn't just affect that person; it affects a lot of other people too. And when you see on TV people, even the people who do get convicted, this, that, and the other, and you see some relief in the victim, they've got a lifetime to lead. They've got almost like a sentence, and they don't seek help, they don't get the help they need, and they suffer and so on. So that's certainly one thing that is another topic for another day.
And I'm also aware that I'm very privileged. I could afford to do lots of therapies. Lots of the therapies I did might not be open to other people because of financial reasons. I was very lucky that I could afford to pay for my sessions. I worked as a volunteer at Rape Crisis in Glasgow, where I live, and now they've had to shut their waiting list because they don't have the funds to, supply the demand. And if you're a woman or man who's just been raped, you want to see someone straight away. You don't want to wait a year to get an appointment. Why should they be funded? Why aren't the government supporting them? We have to raise money for charities so that a service can be there for women and men.
No, that's a really, really important point. I think that something that someone's got no control over. People are going about their own business and don't do any harm to anybody else, and they're living their life, and they're the victim of a horrendous crime, and whatever that crime may be. In this instance, we talk about rape, and it's quite. I think it's quite sad that in the age that we live in, in 2018, we still have not got. There's never going to be enough resources. I think that you can sort of keep stacking them up, but I think, like you've mentioned there, the closure of certain centres and having to wait so long, that can't be a good thing. And I think in the day, certainly things need to be thought through. But we hopefully, we can all hope, and I think the more people like yourself who talk about it, the more awareness there is. And if we can raise awareness somehow, then if someone listens to it and has a realisation, they might bring changes to the system. And that's not. It's no indictment to the people who work in the system. They work really hard. Some good people that work in the system. They do the best they can, the resources they've got. So that's not taking a go at them. I think it's just coming from above.
It's just the system. Even when I was there as a volunteer, a woman could get 10 sessions, and you think, gosh, it might take you 10 sessions just to trust someone or just to open up. Or there's a lot of changes needed.
Yeah, I'd like to see the day where there's a system in place where you've got that support as long as you need it. It's
Absolutely.
not, you're not in the meter. You're not 5, 10 sessions, and you can have this, or you can do your CBT or EMDR, whatever they decide they're going
Yeah.
to use in that situation. It's like you've got what you need until you can get back to an adaptive life as much as one can with those circumstances. I mean, each person is individual. Each person's going to have their own response, really. But equally, we know with support, people have got a much better chance of sort of getting back out there and having a go. It's really powerful stuff. And so, with yourself, what was the experience like with the book? What was your sort of, when you were writing the book? What was the journey like? I mean, yeah.
I don't even have an English O level, so I'm quite proud that I've written a book, because I was rubbish at school. I left because I was pretty traumatized. And so I'd never intended to write my book, but I had written about 12 pages. I was advised it would be really helpful to me to write my story down. I've been going to a workshop for many years, like about 12 years, with a teacher who's a Native American. And he advised me it would be really helpful to me to write my words down. And I said, there's no way. I would be too embarrassed. I couldn't share that with you or anyone else. But that kind of played on me. And it really took about 4 years. And then one day, all the words just came spilling out, about 12 pages of all the details, everything that they did to me. And he told me that he would like to use my story in one of his workshops for other people to hear. And I just was like, no, there's no way. I can't let you do that. I'd be horrified. And he said, no, it's really good for people to hear, because a lot of people live in a bubble. They don't really know what can take place on this planet. And he also wanted to show people we can be really traumatized, but we can walk out of it as well, that there is hope. So, I'd been going to him for years and I trusted him. But what he didn't tell me was that he was going to let people read my 12 pages that I had written. And when I discovered that, I just felt so ill. I just thought I could never walk back into these workshops again. They all know the most intimate details about me and what was done to my body. But then I just thought, no, I need to go back. But what I didn't know, I went back to one in Ireland after he had spoken to me, that he also told people not to mention it, to leave me alone, to give me some space. So when I walked in, everybody just looked down at their shoes and nobody even said hello. And, I just felt like I was naked. I just felt so exposed. And in that moment, I just felt all my shame shattering. It just was like, well, okay, what more can people know about me? Mm-hmm. And so then after that, it was just a few months later, I went to hear a speaker from the Forgiveness Project who was up in Glasgow. Normally, all the events are in London. And when she was speaking, I saw the impact that she had on the room. It was a woman called Marion Partington, whose sister Lucy was a victim of Rose and Fred West, who they were serial killers. They murdered and raped a lot of women, buried them in their home. And the way her story just healed the people in the room, I just thought, wow, it was really touched my heart. It was amazing. And she had written a book. And that night, somehow, I just thought, I could write a book. It just literally came out of nowhere. And as soon as I had that thought, I would go to bed at night and all the words would be flying around my mind in my sleep. Literally, I would see the title chapters. I just sat down at my Mac the next day and within 8 weeks it was done. All the words just came out. And I have a friend who's an editor who also goes to these workshops. And he said, oh, you need to include all the details that you wrote for Imaho. And I said, there's no way, Joe, I can't put all those details in. I wouldn't want people to know. And he said, well, actually, as a man, it really helped him to understand that when you're raped, it's more than just being overpowered. It's more than just unwanted sex, whatever he thought it was. He said it really made him think. So I had to work it. And I thought, oh, I don't know. I could see it was still my shame as well. What will people think? And will they be disgusted and they'll look at me in a different way? And then I thought, well, I shouldn't sanitize it. It is what it is. And it was done to me. I don't believe I am my body. I'm not the... And I just thought, well, if we are really going to have a conversation about rape, then yes, it has to be in. And when I finally got my contract with my publishers, they were in two minds. They said, oh, we think it's too much because it's too violent and hadn't read anything like it. And again, I put my argument across saying, actually, no, it has to be in. And I just thought, gosh, I've completely done a whole 360 from saying there's no way I want all the details into saying, actually, I'm really strongly disagree. All the details have to go in. So when you get to that chapter, it's called All of One Night. It comes with a kind of a warning that if you carry on, you will, the details will be just in case somebody is freshly out of being raped, or they're a survivor, or in case they get triggered. So yeah, I'm really pleased that all the details are actually in, and that's really helped me. I think, oh well, people know everything about me now. I've got nothing to be ashamed about now. It's all out there. So yeah, it actually really helped me not to care at all what people think.
No, definitely. Yes, interesting point. I think that what I find interesting too is sort of picking up on a couple of things you mentioned there, is that you mentioned earlier about how for a few years after it happened, the rape had happened, how you sort of had the depression, the eating, and I want to pick up on, I think people in society in general, we all do. I'm not saying I don't do it either. I think everyone does it. Sometimes we can sort of watch and make a judgment on people rather than know the full picture. And I think that we never quite know what people are going through. I've worked really hard at it. I really have over the years at being more conscientious and more aware that people are going through things, and not treading on eggshells, but just being more self-aware that there could be an underlying issue that goes on.
Absolutely. And it's about understanding then, isn't it? Yeah. It's about understanding why is that person treating me that way? What's going on for them? Why are they beeping me so crazily? Whatever. It's always about understanding.
It is definitely. I think so. And I think, certainly, be it teachers, be it people in positions where they around younger people, anyone of any age really, just being a little bit more self-aware. That's not undermining, and they do a good job, not an easy job, but just being more aware on things that they could pick up on that someone might need help with. And if they're not doing their homework, if they're not bringing lunch to school, if they're coming in looking tired, just being more self-aware and thinking, okay, let's see what's going on. Not from a treatment point of view, to refer that person to the right.
Absolutely, we have to listen to the voice of the children. I was bunking school, going to the park all day, smoking drugs, and going home. My parents didn't know I wasn't at school. Somebody must have seen that behaviour wasn't right. I was off in some way, but they just put me down to being naughty. Or my mum had been ill at home, so they put it down to I was just a bit upset about that. But if somebody hopefully today would tune into that, they would see that there was something going on, that it wasn't a normal behavior. But they just thought I was a typical adolescent. And again, I think how many typical adolescents really have had experienced a trauma that we just discount, or they're naughty, or they've got behavioral issues, or they just put it down to something else without really looking at the bigger picture.
That's right. No, definitely. I agree, and there's various correlating factors, but equally looking for certain causal instances. And I think certainly for a teenager to go through a trauma, and we know scientifically the brain isn't fully developed until about 24, 25. So the teenager feels what the adult feels. They just don't have the same processing power. So you can almost magnify the situation beyond magnification, really. And I think one thing that sort of strikes me about yourself, where you see, I'm sure you have your moments, we all do, but you seem to be upbeat and that sort of stuff, really. And I think that what I find interesting really is that it's a very sensitive area, by the way, and I'm not recommending therapists use humour or anything like that.
Oh no, I think we need to take life more seriously. I'm from someone that was nearly killed. Definitely, we need to laugh more. If anything, being nearly killed has shown me that life is precious. We need to really be grateful. I'm so grateful for my life, because I could have been one of those statistics of a young girl that was raped and killed, and for whatever reason, the one that wasn't as bad as the worst one decided to stop him from killing me. That was a clear, definite choice that he made. So I have to be grateful to him. Yes, he had just raped and tortured me, but he also stopped his friend from killing me. So I have enormous gratitude for my life. I'm so grateful to be alive. And a day without laughter is just wasted. You have to laugh. You have to enjoy your life.
No, definitely. I think that, these instances is obviously very sensitive area, and I think that people work at their own pace, and certainly in my experiences about helping people to move along as much as they can tolerate, and incrementally take one step forward, one forward, maybe take one back, but rather than try and extend the comfort zone, just extend the comfort zone rather than try and sort of sink or swim, just take things incrementally and improve, and it's a process really. In the meantime,
it really is a process, and and healing isn't linear. I kind of look at it like an onion, that there's many layers, and sometimes we just do a few layers and then we can stop for a year or two, and then we have to work another layer, and then that's enough for that time, and then we work another layer and another layer till eventually we get to the core. And I think now I'm just at the core. It just really, it would impact on my daily life in so many ways. My safety, my fear about being around men. I couldn't be in the dark. I couldn't be alone. I couldn't be in a crowd. I'd get in my car. I'd put the buttons down. Fear just ran my life. And then I had to really find a way to challenge my fears, because I saw that fear was just my imagination. Everything I was scared of had already happened, or I was worried about could happen. But when I really examined my fear, none of it was going on right now. So I saw fear was my imagination. So I went out of my way. I may be a little bit strange, but I saw things that I would normally be scared of doing. So I put myself into situations where I would be out of control and where I would be surrounded by men. So for me, I guess it was like exposure therapy, my own my own kind of thing. I don't know where it came from, but so now I do karate. I'm often one of one or two women in a class of 50 guys. I go windsurfing. I'm a weightlifter. I lift weights. I work with men as well. I would never work with men, and then I got to a point I saw I would only see women clients. So I said to a receptionist where I was doing my placement, I only want to see male clients. I don't want any more female clients. And that way I just saw that actually men are just the same as women when it comes to doing therapy with them, that they think and feel and bleed exactly the same way that we do. So you have to really get to a place where you have to challenge your thoughts, because your mind isn't always your friend. And I saw that my mind, what is your mind anyway? If I cut my mind, it's not going to bleed. It was trying to protect me, but it was too much. It was the strategies that I had put in place for years were just out of date. But it gets to a place where you have to really wake up and see, what am I doing? I couldn't even put my wheelie bin down the end of the garden if it was dark and my husband was away. I was too scared to go into my garden, and I think this now is crazy. It wasn't really what happened to me. It was now what I was then doing with it, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. It sounds to me that in your experiences, it's almost like watering the memory down, so to speak. Obviously, it's the traumatic memory from the point of view of your gradual exposure, sort of gradually, step by step, got you to where you are. And I think that it's almost like, you've got a puddle of water and sort of dampen, reappraising it as well. And memory consolidation isn't always reliable. We know that. For example, if you go away on holiday last year, the day you get back, you're going to remember it a lot better than you remember it now from the cognitive point of view. But emotionally, obviously, the experience and the feeling can stay pretty much like it was in that situation. But there is that to take into consideration. I think that your intuition, you seem a very intuitive person. I think the intuition from me outside looking in, speaking to you, it seems your intuition has had, and that might sound every for people. Certainly, some of my colleagues will probably think it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but I truly believe some of us we've all got it. It's just tuning into the intuition.
Absolutely. And that's what I said before. I don't know where it came from, but something always drove me to clean up. And it's very true what you say about the memories and the pictures. I saw that I had to work them to take the sting out of it, to take the energy associated. Because when I first started to do it, I would be sick in my sessions. I would be shaking. I would be crying. I would not want to go anywhere near the memories, but they were taking over me in body memories. It got to a point where I had no choice. I had to work it because it was affecting my daily life. But it was really about taking the sting out of it all, where I could actually then just watch the show and not be affected in any way. And that's what I did. But it's like I said, it's not a linear process. It's not a straight line healing. It's backwards and forwards and years and years, and it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight.
Of course, and I think for sure what works for one person might not work for somebody else.
Absolutely.
But equally, I would always suggest people to get the professional help as early as they can. I believe anyway, in my infinite wisdom, that the earlier you can get help, the better it is.
Yeah, but that's a hard one, isn't it? Because if you're really young, so, you don't know what help you need.
Certainly, precisely, and that's an important point. I think that's why it's important, in my opinion, that people like yourself are brave, and we've got to be grateful for people like yourself who stand up and speak, because it is important that people get help as early as they can. And letting emotions fester in the mind is a bit like having bad food in the fridge that you leave it in there, it starts to happen with everything else. And
you need to open all the windows and all the doors.
Precisely. and the obvious thing is, people are going to say, well, it's easy for you to say, Jim, you haven't been through that. But someone who has been through, like yourself, saying it, I think has that credibility. You've experienced it, and I think it's really, really powerful stuff. And what worked for you might not work for them. And
absolutely. But I would say the single most thing that had helped me, which will help anyone, is to find your voice. There is nothing more powerful than being listened to and heard and believed. I don't expect everyone to be a public speaker like me and stand on a stage and share their story, but to share your story, even if you don't go to a therapist, if you share it with a friend, a really trusted friend, or write it down, or just tell yourself your story in your bed at night. Tell yourself your story so you don't avoid it and you don't deny it, because it was the denying of it and the avoiding of my story that kept me trapped in my story. Once I acknowledged it and accepted and surrendered to what it was, it was horrible, but it didn't kill me. I am still alive, and I'm so grateful for my life. They've actually taught me a lot, these two guys who tried to kill me, but they have shown me a lot, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I wouldn't undo it now, because it has made me the woman that I am.
That's really, really powerful. It's a really powerful sentiment, a really, really powerful sentiment for sure. And it takes a lot of bravery to evolve to that sentiment, so to speak. I think that your philosophy on life, your view on life, is really brave. And I think that I truly believe that you've obviously helped a lot of people on your journey, just speaking, and a lot more people will get a lot out of what you've got to say. And if nothing else, one of the most important things, like you said there, is just finding their own voice and doing the best they can.
And it's never too late. Never. I think of my friend's 81-year-old mother who shared her story for the first time.
Wow.
Never too late. And there's always a way. There's always support somewhere.
Yeah, that's important too. I'm sort of mindful of time. You've been very, very kind to come on and share your story. If people want to get in touch in regards to your book and the seminars you do and public speaking engagements, is there somewhere they can get in touch?
Sure, there's loads of places, but you could go to my website, which is madelineblack.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, madblack65 on Twitter and Instagram. But you'll find me wherever.
Yeah. No, definitely, because I think it's a really, really powerful story, and certainly, it's really, it's one of them stories where it's hard to put into words. It's what people go through, and we all go through things.
It is, but I know that sadly, from the messages I get every day, my story is not uncommon. My story is the story of many, many men and women on this planet, and that needs to end. It needs to end somehow.
Yeah. Definitely, I agree with that sentiment for sure. And one person is one person too many, and obviously there's a lot of people out there that we're not even aware of that are going through that. And the sooner we work at the deepest level possible to put this to an end, because obviously there's really some deep issues. It's beyond anyone's comprehension, really, in terms of why. We can look at it from a biological, psychological, sociological point of view, and it's hard to pinpoint, what goes through people's minds, how people get to that point to do these.
Well, I've looked at that many, many times, and the only thing I can really come up with is I just think we are a very immature species living on the planet, and we have a lot to learn.
I think so too. I definitely have sentiments too, and I think it's one of them really. I believe that there are variable factors in people's behaviour. I think it's a cocktail of genes, of environment, of experiences, of all these things that, one thing and another really. And I also believe that, there's a lot of good in the world, and a lot of great people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And majority is good. And,
I think so.
Love will always win over hate. Always.
I think so. Being that force for the good for sure. And I think that, being that light for the good is important. And I think, standing up and speaking the truth and going out there can make people feel a bit vulnerable. But I think sometimes, when you sort of part of a bigger cause, you kind of find your voice in your own way.
But it's irony, isn't it? Or the paradox is we don't want to step into our darkest places, but when we step into them, that's where we grow, that's where we heal. And for years I avoided it, and now I see, actually, this is what's grown me. This is what's really helped me. So we kind of told, well, you can't do that. It's going to be too much. It's never too much. You've already experienced it and you didn't die, So we really have to learn to be not okay at times.
Of course, no, I think so too. I think sometimes, like you said, it's important to be okay with not being okay, and we're only human. We're all on this sort of journey together, and we're all sort of have our sort of trials and tribulations that we're going through. And I think the more everyone can sort of muck in together and sort of help each other best we can, the better we're going to go forward in life and go from there. But I really want to thank you for coming on board.
Oh, you're so welcome, Jim. It's lovely to speak to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Madeleine.
You're welcome.
All the best.
Bye.